Hi there, welcome back. If you're listening while driving, crafting, or just resting for a moment, I'm glad you're here. If you're joining me here through YouTube, this is a long-form spoken podcast meant to be listened to slowly, more like a conversation at the hearth than a fast-paced video. So grab an ice cold drink, some comfy snacks, and settle in. Among all the gods of the north, none are described with the same sense of affection as Baldr. The sources speak of him with unusual warmth. He is called fair, beautiful, wise, gracious, beloved by gods and people alike. His hall, Breidablik, is said to be so pure that nothing unclean may exist within it. Wherever Baldr appears, there is a sense that things are as they should be. That alone makes his story all the more painful, because unlike many myths where a hero falls through pride, arrogance, or poor decisions, Baldr does nothing wrong. His death arrives not because he deserves it. It arrives because fate has already chosen him. And once fate makes its choice, even the gods themselves struggle to change it. What follows is as full a story as could be told with the material in the original sources. To fill in the gaps, I have taken liberties to include my own interpretations, thoughts, and gnosis regarding the progression of events. I have tweaked conversations a little to help give it a slightly modern feel for those who struggle understanding speech patterns of old. I have added pieces and interpretations based on my own reading, but not necessarily substantiated by scholars today. What currently exists is minimal, so I sought to give you a story that would resonate and potentially offer insight into a different way of looking at the lore we have. It may not be popular, but it is a possibility. Whether you're a solitary or group practitioner, brand new to the path, or simply finding your way back again, pull up a seat, get your crafting on, and walk the virtual trails with me. You are welcome here. Baldr in Norse mythology is the son of Odin and Frigg. He has several half-brothers, one of the more famous being Thor. But we know of at least one full brother, HER-mohthr. HER-mohthr is blind, according to the lore, and has no partner. Baldr, however, fell in love with a Vanir maid, Nanna, daughter of Nept. She was quiet and kind and deeply loved by her husband. They had a son by the name of Forseti. All was well. Their family was happy, healthy, and a joy to all that knew them. Until the dreams began. No one knows what started them or where they came from. Only that Baldr began having dreams. Not ordinary dreams, but dark and troubling visions that left him deeply unsettled. Night after night they come. Images of danger, of death, of grand destruction. A growing certainty wears on his mind and spirit that something terrible is approaching. Baldr's demeanor grows quieter, more somber, the stress of the sleepless nights taking their toll. The gods take these dreams seriously, for dreams in Norse cosmology are rarely treated as meaningless. They are warnings, messages, glimpses of things moving beneath the surface of the world. Concerned for their son's downward turn, Odin and Frigg summon him to their hall and beg him to share what has made him so ill. When Baldr speaks of what he has seen, the horror and death, unease spreads through Asgard. Even Odin, who has faced giants, monsters, and prophecy itself, becomes concerned. And so he does what he always does when knowledge is needed. He goes looking for answers. Taking Sleipnir, his 8-legged horse, Odin rides downward toward Helheim. The journey is long and strange. Riding through the road of Yggdrasil, he passes through many realms, unseen places, and many layers of existence. Eventually, he reaches the realm ruled by Hel, daughter of Loki. As he rides, he is met by a dog whose chest was blood-stained and his jaws overflowing with saliva. It bayed loudly and gaped at Odin with his steed. Long he howled even after Odin rode on. The ground itself rattled under the hooves of the living until he came to the gates of Hel's hall and dismounted just outside. There he discovers something that made his insides clench. A great hall has already been prepared. Benches covered, mead poured, gold laid out, everything arranged as though an honored guest is expected. The dead are already making ready for his arrival. He did not knock for entry. He did not call out to the ruler of this realm. Instead, he began to work the magic he needed. He looked towards the north and cast his spells, using powerful runes. He raised a dead Volva, a seeress, buried long ago, compelling her to speak. As you can imagine, she is not too pleased at being awoken. Who the hell woke me up at this ungodly hour? I have been dead a long time, long enough for snow to cover my grave, rain to drum upon the soil, and morning's dew to collect countless times. Who would dare to wake me and cause me such discomfort? I dare. My name is Vegtam. I come from Earth to this darkened place to ask you for knowledge. Hel's hall has been decorated with couches covered in gold and benches with treasures laid upon them. Who is that for? Fine. If you must know, it's for the god Baldr. His handsome face will grace these halls soon. His people are going to hate that. Now go away. I'm tired. Not yet. I have more questions and want answers. If Baldr is to die, who would dare to take his life? Baldr's brother will be the culprit. I've answered you. Now go away. I'm tired. No, wait. I'm not done. If his brother commits this crime, who will avenge Baldr? Jesus! A son shall be created by Rind in the halls on the west side. This son will avenge Baldr's death at only one night old. That first day he will not shower or bathe, only determine the best way to kill the offender. For the love of all that's holy, I'm tired. Now go away. But there is more to ask. Don't leave yet. Who are the women that weep at a moment's notice and yank off their clothes? At least tell me that, or there will be no rest for you. I knew it. You aren't Vegtam. You lied. You are Odin. And you are no prophetess, you ugly hag. Ugly hag! Go home, Odin, and put your affairs in order. I will answer no more men nor spells until your brother is free and the end times begin. She sunk back beneath the ground, muttering about rude gods and unearned truths. Reluctantly, Odin has learned what he fears most. Baldr is doomed. His death is coming. The preparations in Helheim are real. No power in the 9 worlds appears capable of stopping what has already been set in motion. Odin returns home, carrying knowledge he wishes he did not possess. While Odin was seeking answers from Hel's realm, Baldr's mother did not sit idle. When Frigg learns of the danger, she sets her own plans in motion. A powerful sovereignty goddess in her own right, Frigg is not one to trifle with, especially if the fate of her son is at stake. No, if fate intended to take her son, she will make fate work for it. Hard. Gathering the women sworn to her, she gives instructions. Go out to all the realms, to lands and people everywhere. Tell them of Baldr's dreams, and then extract the oaths to do nothing that would cause him harm. She too traveled the distant places in order to garner the oaths needed to keep her beloved boy safe. She had a plan, she had a purpose, and nothing was going to stop her. The sacred vows began to filter into Asgard. The elements of fire and water swear not to harm Baldr. All stone and metal swear the same. Disease swears, animals swear, plants swear. Baldr is so loved by all that even poisons swear. Everything capable of causing injury is made to promise that it will never harm her son. Once the work is finished, Baldr appears untouchable. Nothing in existence can wound him. Frigg returns to Fensalir, knowing that she has done all she can to lay the stones of the future in place. So, naturally, the gods turn this new state of being for Baldr into a game. So what does one do in Asgard when you find out that a member of the ruling class is invincible? You throw shit at him, of course. Once the word spread about Baldr's invulnerability, the gods just had to test it out. They all gathered in the large feasting hall just down the way from Frigg's Fensalir. Amidst the raucous laughter, dares, and bets, food was consumed, as well as a boatload of ale and meat. The gods were joyous to have averted disaster, and within this hall, no fights or battles were allowed. All present had sworn to peace. Then the games began. Weapons are thrown. Axes strike wood and stone. Spears fly harmlessly by their target. Stones are hurled but fall short. Everything bounces harmlessly away. Baldr stands at one end of the hall, laughing for the first time in months while the gods celebrate. The aversion from doom becomes entertainment, as there is now proof that Frigg has defeated fate. Baldr is safe. The spectacle and noise grew louder until a lone figure leaves the hall to head up the path to Fensalir. Walking slowly, thoughtfully, the figure begins to shift its shape. Gone was the observer, and instead an old woman appears. Shawl on her shoulders, cane in hand, she makes her way into the Lady of Asgard's domain. Upon entering, she slowly approaches the dais where Frigg sits, her handmaidens and servants bustling about. Frigg turns to see the old woman, and for the briefest of moments goes very still. It would be imperceptible to most, but the old woman noticed and took a deep breath. There was recognition in the eyes of Asgard's queen. Did anyone else notice? Will it all be for naught? The old woman lifts her face to address the dais. They cannot wait any longer. Everything depends on this exchange. They must both play their parts. Greetings, Frigga, Queen of Asgard. And to you, wise traveler, what brings you to my hall? On my way here, I noticed great celebrations in the feasting hall below. It appears that all the Aesir are gathered. Tell me, what is it that they rejoice so loudly over? They honor my son, Baldr, and his triumph over disaster. What disaster is that, wise lady? Death. All things have sworn not to harm him. It is this that the Aesir celebrate. All things have sworn? Really? There is nothing that refused? No. No stone, tree, metal, element, or creature refused the call to the oath. That is a great achievement if it is so. Were all things asked? A pause. A sadness entered her eyes and then was quickly gone. But it must be done. It was too late to back out now. There was one small living thing whose oath I did not ask. What was it? What made it not worthy of asking such an important question? An intake of breath. A small plant, hardly noticeable as it sits so high in the trees. It is called the mistletoe. It is a young plant. I thought perhaps that such a slight and delicate thing that it was, there was no need to extract such a heavy toll as an oath from it. Well, if you felt that the question did not need to be asked of it, then I am sure it is safe. Thank you for your time and hospitality in humoring this old woman, great lady. I will not forget. A short while later, the old woman left. No one but the lady of Fensalir noticed. At the doorway, the woman stopped for a single moment, daring to look back in case the plan had changed. Frigg deliberately looked away and went on with her duties. The old woman slowly walked away, sad but determined. She had a job to do and a journey to make. As she left the walls of Asgard behind, the shape of the woman began to shift again. This time, a tall, lean but muscular man took her place. His red hair tied back so as not to draw attention, he picked up his pace. He knew where the mistletoe grew, just to the west. Knew exactly how to obtain it and what would be needed. There was no more time for wishful thinking or second-guessing. He carefully climbs the tree to approach the mistletoe. Taking out a small sickle, he cuts a branch off and ties it to his belt. Climbing back down the tree, he thinks about how to shape it for the task ahead. Should it be a dart or spearhead? He sits below the tree branches and contemplates the small plant in his hand. So young and tender, how can such a thing cause so much chaos? Slowly, he begins to carve it, letting the plant give voice to how it should be made. Once the piece was ready, he stood and began the journey back. As he arrives near the gathering, Loki dons his usual attire and sets his face in a slightly concerned but sardonic expression. He watches carefully before approaching Hermóðr on the benches. Baldr's brother has been left out of the festivities due to his blindness. Loki approaches him and announces himself. Hello, Hermóðr. There is great rejoicing in the hall at Baldr's good fortune. Why do you look so down? Why do you not participate in the games as well? Hello, Loki. Know well that I cannot see. I am happy for my brother, but I am unable to celebrate in like manner with the gods. Ah, well, that is a problem. Let me think. What if I were to help you play? It isn't cheating, and I am surprised the other gods haven't thought of it before now. How would you help me? Once you take your position, I would adjust your aim so that you could allow the weapon to fly just like the others. But I do not have a weapon to throw. Well, what about this dart? Loki pulled the small dart he had fashioned from his pocket. His behavior displayed nothing but nonchalance and an unauthentic willingness to help. I don't know. Perhaps it is better if I do not participate. Come on, one dart. The rest have thrown nearly every weapon owned, and your brother is still standing strongly and laughing. One small dart will be nothing, and you will be able to say that you too were part of the celebrations. All right. In truth, I had felt a bit left out. I can try this once. What harm could it do if it is a small dart, as you say? A small twinge of guilt threatened to take root in Loki's heart at HER-mohtr's words, but he quickly squashed it down. Helping the blind god to a place in the center, Loki places the dart in his hand and lines him up for the shot. Baldr was overjoyed to see his brother join in the fun and encouraged him to throw with a strong arm. Loki whispers the directions to HER-mohthr and then steps away. He slips quickly unseen to the doorway, ready to leave as soon as the deed was done. Just had to make sure first. HER-mohthr carefully raised his hand and threw the dart as he'd been instructed. The mistletoe flies, and for the first time since the games began, something finds its mark. The dart strikes Baldr and pierces his flesh. With a look of shock, he goes still. The hall becomes rapidly drenched in a quiet that was heavy and unnatural. And the next blink, Baldr falls to the floor, dead. Seeing that the job was done, Loki turns back to the door and quietly leaves. Shock hit everyone like a wave. HER-mohthr is standing in the center of the hall, his weapon the one that fell his brother, but he doesn't know yet. No word has been spoken since he threw the dart. He can sense something is very wrong, but doesn't understand. Did I hit you, brother? Have I played the game correctly? Silence. Baldr? Brother? Why does no one answer? Vidar slowly approaches his half-brother and whispers the truth to him. He is dead. Your dart has killed him. Disbelief and grief washes over HER-mohthr. It couldn't be. Everything had sworn not to harm him. He turned from side to side, hoping that someone, anyone, would tell him it wasn't true. He could tell that Loki was no longer there. How could this happen? No one else approached HER-mohthr. Not only was Baldr dead, but at the hands of his brother, it was a kinslaying. Done in sanctified space, no one present could avenge the action, or they would violate their own oaths. The gods carry Baldr's body out of the feasting hall, taking him to Breidablik so his body may be prepared for burial. HER-mohthr finally leaves, walking alone, grieving his brother and the action he had committed. As he crested the hill leading to his mother's hall, HER-mohthr felt a shadow cross his face. He did not recognize the scent, but there was a magic at play. Powerful magic. Who was there? Baldr's avenger. It was over quickly. HER-mohthr barely had time to speak anything further. He was not armed and would not have been able to move fast enough to block the attack. His death was swift and painless. His body was then carried to Frigg so that his own funeral could be planned, though due to his crime it would be a much quieter one. Baldr's avenger. The words echoed across the land. Earlier that day, as the games were in full swing and the old woman had yet to leave Frigg's hall, Odin had walked across Asgard to a different hall. He had not needed to see his son slain. He needed to set the remaining wheels in motion. Approaching the hall of ringed Vesterselir, he walked inside where the goddess sat waiting. He was not one to trust anyone else with foreknowledge, but Rind was different. She was powerful in her own right. She gave good counsel when asked, but never shared secrets given to her. He began to speak the reason for his visit. Rind, I honor you in your hall. I have come to you seeking aid. That is an odd thing for you to request, Allfather. What is it that you require? He must act fast for the timing to work. As she sat listening, Odin explained. Baldr was about to die, and he would die at the hands of his brother within the sacred feasting hall. This creates a problem for avenging Baldr's death. Rind was thoughtful, carefully weighing the information shared with her, but not yet speaking. The problem Odin referenced was a kinslaying. In their society, a killing could not simply be ignored. Someone had to answer for it. It created an obligation to set the scales right again. Sometimes that obligation took the form of vengeance or the paying of compensation known as wergild. But when the death involved that of a family member on both sides of the slaying, it added an extra layer of complication. The difficulty in Baldr's case lie in the fact that his killer was HER-mohthr. HER-mohthr was not an enemy, nor the member of a rival clan. He was Baldr's brother. Slaying him for the crime would only tip the scales further out of balance should one of his other brothers pursue the obligation of vengeance. Wergild could not be offered from the same coffers that it came from. And to further complicate the matter, because the death occurred within the gathering of the gods themselves, there was no easy path forward without breaking oaths. The only way Baldr could be avenged would be if an outsider intervened. But the Jotnar could not be trusted to stop with HER-mohthr. The outsider still needed ties to Asgard and the people within. Odin and Rind discussed the ramifications of doing nothing. Then he shared the words of the prophetess regarding the Avenger, the prophecy concerning Vali. To avoid yet another slaying of kin, this new element could not be blood-related to Odin. But he needed a connection to the Lord of Asgard to ensure his loyalty and the sense of obligation needed to complete the task. Thus Rind came up with a solution: how to have it both ways. They blended old, powerful magic with runes and seidr. Much like the creation of Kvasir at the end of the Vanir War, Rind and Odin combined their energies to create. Reciting the words the Volva had shared, he will not wash, he will not comb his hair, he will not perform the ordinary acts expected of a child. He grows to manhood with speed. Within a day, he is old enough to fulfill the purpose for which he is born. He will avenge Baldr's death by killing HER-mohthr. His name shall be Vali, the Chosen One. What is created from their magics is a man of strong build, purpose gleaming in his eyes. The All-Father gave him the breath of life, a keen intellect, and fair complexion was seen to bloom in his cheeks. Rind blessed him with skill, strength, a purpose, and a soul. His role isn't about vengeance in the modern sense, but about restoring imbalance. He is there, breathing with new life, and yet bound to a duty he didn't ask for. In his creation, Vali becomes one more casualty of Baldr's death rather than its solution. Bound to the will of his makers, Vali has lost any chance at an ordinary life. But allowing the imbalance to remain would have been just as dangerous. He is born into obligation. His entire existence, beginning with a debt that must be paid. He doesn't choose the task. Task chooses him, so he must answer. It was at this point that the news of Baldr's death began to spread. Vali looks into the eyes of Odin and sees nothing but hardened resolve. With Rind, that resolve is tempered with compassion, but no avenue to turn back was offered. Addressing them as mother and father, he picks up his weapons and answers the pull within his heart. So begins the hunt for Baldr's killer. Vali finds him walking carefully up the path toward Fensalir. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes clearly devoid of sight. Vali watches him for a few brief moments to weigh his opponent, but sees no challenge before him. Understanding fills him as he takes his stance across the lane. Though he knows the sightless man bears no fault, duty must be obeyed. Feet rooted, weapon in hand, he waits until HER-mohthr senses him. Who is there? A shaky, uncertain voice, not one of a murderer. Baldr's avenger. His voice was deep, resonating. It was matter of fact, the movement to end this figure in front of him. No lengthy duel, no dramatic speeches, no moral debate. One moment alive, and the next not. Baldr's death has been answered, and the obligation is fulfilled. The scales are once more balanced, at least externally. Vali feels no satisfaction from the conclusion. It is far more tragic than triumphant. He carefully picks up the body of the brother he will never know, the one who had to die by his hands, and walks the remaining way towards Frigg's hall. He may have had to end this life, but the least he could do was give him dignity and the chance to be mourned by those that had loved him. The shock that settled over Asgard after Baldr's death was so profound that even the gods struggled to move. No one rushed forward with a clever solution. No one produced a hidden spell to reverse the events. For a time, there was only grief. Among those struck hardest was Nanna, Baldr's wife. Within their hall, she is overcome with sorrow. Covering the doors and windows with the trappings of mourning, Nanna and Forseti shed tears and cried out for the man they loved. Frigg and Odin grieve both their sons, though one more quietly than the other. Fate had won this round, but they held to the hope that their actions had had the desired effect. The plan was not finished, however. Appearances must be kept. The gods prepared Baldr's funeral upon his great ship, Ringhorni, said to be the finest vessel ever built. Baldr's horse, fully saddled and equipped, was brought as well, prepared to accompany its master into the next world. Seeing this, and her husband's body laying lifeless within the torchlight, Nanna's sorrow became so overwhelming that her heart simply could not bear it. It gave out right there, and she died of grief, leaving their son to complete the tasks that would send her down the journey to join her beloved in Helheim. Her body was draped in the raiments of her station and placed gently beside her husband on board Ringhorni. Yet even in death, Baldr's presence and power seemed larger than life itself. The ship was so massive that none of the gods could push it into the sea. They strained against it, pulled at ropes, applied all their strength. Nothing happened. Eventually, a giantess named Hyrrokin was summoned from Jotunheim. She arrived riding an enormous wolf using serpents as reins. Even the gods found her unsettling. When she dismounted and placed her hands upon the ship, it lurched forward with such force that fire burst from the rollers beneath it, and the earth trembled. Thor became so enraged by the display that he nearly struck her dead with Mjolnir, though the gods restrained him. Then Odin mounted the steps towards his son. Slow, methodical, one would never know the sorrow warring with the control within him. The All-Father stepped forward, carrying Draupnir, the golden ring from which 8 identical rings dripped every 9th night. A treasure unlike any other. It was a symbol of wealth, kingship, and abundance. Without hesitation, he placed it upon his son's funeral pyre. One of the most valuable possessions in existence was given to a dead man on his journey to the land of the dead. Bending over Baldr's body, his grief nearly overwhelming him, Odin spoke softly in his ear. A message of love or a spell for the future. No one could hear the words, and so the secret was kept. As the pyre was prepared, a dwarf named Hreidr happened to be standing nearby. He had come to bid farewell to the purest of gods. He did nothing more than simply walking across the path of Thor, who, whether in anger, grief, frustration, or simple impatience, kicked him into the flames. The dwarf vanished into the burning pyre with no further thought offered on him. When all was ready, Thor consecrated the funeral with Mjolnir. The flames rose as the ship drifted out across the water. The brightest of the gods set sail and passed beyond the reach of the living. There was no music, no games, only silence as their hope disappeared over the horizon. Frigg then spoke to the gods and goddesses, allowing her sorrow to etch deep lines to her face. She stood tall, proud, and with her words refused to accept her son's fate without a fight. Someone had to ride to Helheim and ask for Baldr's return. Who amongst them wished to gain all of her love and favor? In surprise, they gaped at her. the living did not cross the boundaries willingly. Who would be brave enough to stand before the mistress of the dead to make such a request? Frigg's youngest son, Hermóðr, often called the Swift, stepped forward. His brothers were dead. His sister-in-law now finding her way to the below realm. He had not been able to avenge either of them, but he could answer his mother's call and seek out the counsel of Loki's daughter. He had to try. Having made the trip before, Odin gave him the reins of his steed, Sleipnir. Mounting up, Hermóðr began one of the most remarkable journeys in Norse mythology. Leaving the site of the funeral, he rode through darkness for 9 nights. There was no sunlight, no stars, only the endless road leading downward toward the realm of the dead. Unlike his father, Hermóðr could only ride a single, more direct road, rather than the multi-world and realm path that Yggdrasil offered. At last, tired and thirsty, he reached the river Gjöll. There he raised its bridge and encountered Moldgudr, the maiden who guarded the crossing. She complained of his loud approach and began to question him carefully. Few living beings traveled this road, and fewer still rode it willingly. Hermóðr shared the reason for his journey, the task his mother had set, and after answering Moldgudr's questions, was allowed to continue onward until he finally arrived at the gates of Hel's Hall. Hermóðr dismounted, tightened Sleipnir's girth, mounted again, and spurred Sleipnir so that the steed leapt entirely over the gate. Finally, he came to Eljutnir. Dismounting, he cautiously approached the doors. Respectfully, he walked across the threshold towards the fires and tables. There, he sees his brother Baldr. He is speaking with Hela, a smile upon his handsome face, a small circlet upon his brow matching the one on Hela's. 2 tall-backed chairs, sitting side by side and draped with the raiments of rulers, were in the center. Baldr had Hela's hand in his and appeared to be fine. Hela was the daughter of Loki and the witch Angrboda. She was intelligent, capable, but her visage was difficult to look at for long. Half youthful maiden in the bloom of life, and half corpse slowly rotting. It was unsettling to see. But Baldr didn't seem to notice the different sides. He looked into her eyes and face without flinching, and somehow seemed to bring Hela a form of joy. Their body language was more intimate than Hermóðr had expected. Their movements and closeness seemed to display a deeper connection than a recently deceased god. Looking around the room, he saw another familiar face. Leaning over the tables to the side was Nanna. She looked content as she quietly spoke with the other residents. Neither were suffering. They did not appear to be imprisoned, just simply among the dead. Baldr and Hela looked up at Hermóðr's entrance. The reunion was bittersweet. Baldr welcomed him warmly. Hela nodded and then left the hall to grant them privacy, as it was clear that Hermóðr was more than a little uncomfortable around her. He was given food and drink, Sleipnir as well. He spent the equivalent of a night as the guest, reminiscing on childhood memories in Asgard. In the morning, he presented himself formally to Hela. She sat in one of the central chairs, Baldr next to her, a position of equal standing and respect. Nanna sat in a different seat a little to the side, a chair much smaller. It was clear that Baldr was now co-ruler of Helheim as Hel's consort. but it didn't appear that Nanna was upset at this change of relationship. Hermóðr had learned that Hela had gifted her with the running of the entire hall, a symbol of respect and status, and had shown great empathy and caring for her well-being. The marriage ties that Baldr and Nanna had enjoyed within Asgard had been severed once Baldr died and reached Helheim. Time moves differently for the dead, so when Nanna had arrived, enough time had passed that Baldr had taken another to wife. Months or even years had gone by within these walls, though only days in the lands of the living. Hela granted Hermóðr the chance to present the reason for his visit. Taking a deep breath, he looked directly at her and began. He shared the grief of the gods, especially that of Frigg. He told of how all the lands mourned the loss of their beloved Baldr. Listening to his words, Hel remained quiet. Baldr sat beside her, their hands clasped, but he said nothing. His face had a trace of sadness, but did not seem as if he was greatly concerned. It is natural to mourn the dead, after all. The denizens of Asgard would be no different. But when Hermóðr began to lay his case for Baldr's return, those present became very still. Surely the most beloved of gods should not remain among the dead. Surely some exception could be made. Such a request was unheard of. But Hela was not cruel or heartless. She was not unsympathetic. Rather, she felt that if such grief existed in the abundance that this traveler stated, then eventually it would affect the residents of her realm, causing distress. She was their guardian, their protector. Anything that would cause them distress had to be dealt with. Hela had grown to love her new consort, but sometimes, as ruler, harder decisions had to be made. In a soft, slightly raspy voice, Hela answered him. You say that all within the lands of the living weep for your brother. For me to consider your request, this must be proven. If all things in the world, alive or dead, do indeed weep for him, then I will allow him to return to the Aesir. Every creature, every stone, every tree, every being, every force. If anyone speaks against him or refuses to cry, then instead of returning, he will remain here with me as my consort. No other petitions will be considered afterwards. Tell this to your people. Tell this to Frigg. A quick glance of surprise in her direction came and went on Baldr's face, but rather than joy at potential freedom, he appeared cautious and careful in his demeanor. Hela's servants prepared Sleipnir and Hermóðr for the return journey. Nanna approached and sent gifts back to Frigg to show her love. Baldr placed the ring Draupnir into his brother's hand to return to Odin as a token of remembrance. Neither of them could leave, and strangely to Hermóðr's eyes, they didn't appear to want to. He rode quickly back to Asgard to share the news. A chance to get him back. A chance to right the awful events of before. Odin had taken private counsel with his son to learn the details that had not been shared. No mention of Hermóðr or a potential return for him as well. The gifts from Baldr and Nanna were dispersed with whatever words had been offered. Once the Lord and Lady of Asgard had heard all they needed, the decree was sent out. The gift Hela had offered in response to their grief was retold. All must weep. It sounded simple. After all, who would refuse? Messengers spread across the 9 worlds. The request went everywhere, and everywhere the answer was the same. Tears were shed. Humans wept. Gods wept. Giants wept. Animals mourned. Trees shed moisture. Stones wept. Even metal was said to cry. The grief of the world echoed through every realm, trickling down to Hela's hall for measuring. It seemed impossible that the test could fail, until the messengers found one final figure, an old giantess in a cave named Thok. She sat alone in her home, food bubbling over the fire, herbs and tools lying strewn on counters. When the messengers arrived, she did not offer hospitality as was expected. She sat in her large chair and waited for them to get on with it. They recounted the tale of Hermóðr's ride and Hela's offer. They shared that all the worlds, all the things within the worlds, had begun to weep as a show of their love for Baldr.
Is that what all that racket is? How am I supposed to sleep with all of that going on?
The messengers looked at one another in confusion, but pushed on. One stepped forward and asked Thok to weep for Baldr.
No.
In shock, her visitors stood there. Thinking they had misheard the response or perhaps not been clear in their question, they asked again. To honor Hela's request and end the grief of Frigg and the Aesir, will you cry for Baldr's death, that he might be returned?
No. I will weep waterless tears for Baldr's fate. In life, nor in death, I loved not Odin's son. Let Hel hold to what she has.
Her words ring out, echoing in the cavern, and are among the coldest in Norse mythology. She has declared that Hel could keep what she already possessed. No tear would come from her eyes. With that single refusal, the bargain was broken. The messengers left, shaken to their cores. They relayed the event to the denizens of Asgard, now knowing that Baldr could not return to them. Sitting in the chair, watching the messengers leave, Thok begins to change shape. Gone was the ugly ogress. In her place, Loki appeared. It was done. His role was complete for now. He had to let time pass before the next pieces could be laid in place. He left the cave and began his travels back to Asgard. He would take his time. He would mourn for what was already lost and what would soon be along the way. They must accept what has happened. And when the time was right, they must believe in the spite he would have to show. This final twist of the knife was not quite the end. Another was still to come. But because of it, Baldr remained among the dead, where they had agreed he belonged. Most stories would end there, with the loss, the mourning, the tragedy, but this tale held notes of something different. Baldr's story does not truly end in Helheim. It waits until the end of Ragnarök. It waits beyond the fall of the gods and the burning of the world. When the great destruction has passed and a new earth rises from the sea, Baldr returns. The sources describe a renewed world with green fields and fresh growth, a second beginning. Among those who walk that renewed earth are Baldr and HER-mohthr, the slain god and the brother whose hand unknowingly struck him down. The wound heals and the cycle completes. Baldr becomes not merely a god of beauty or light, but a symbol of renewal itself. The promise that even after unimaginable loss, something can emerge again, not unchanged or untouched, but alive. One of the reasons many modern heathens may honor Baldr at Midsummer isn't because the sources explicitly place his death there. They don't. As I said at the beginning of this episode, the material left to us regarding Baldr's death is minimal. Instead, the connection grows from symbolism. At Midsummer, the sun reaches its greatest height. The days are longest, the fields are green, life feels abundant. Yet from that very moment, the wheel begins to turn towards the darkness. Baldr's story carries that same bittersweet truth. The brightest things are not precious because they last forever. They are precious because they don't. And perhaps that is why his tale continues to be told around summer fires. Not as a story about death, but as a reminder to cherish the light while it is here, to celebrate beauty while it is present, and to trust that even when darkness comes, it will not have the final word. Thank you for sitting with me today as we wandered through the story of Baldr, one of the most beloved and complicated figures in the Norse world. His tale reminds us that even at the height of light, loss still exists, and perhaps that is exactly why Midsummer holds such power. We celebrate because life is beautiful, fleeting, and worth celebrating while it is here. As we move into the summer solstice and midsummer celebrations, I hope you give yourself permission to fully experience the season. Sit beneath the stars, build a fire if you're able, dance, laugh, eat good food, drum if the mood strikes you, and allow yourself to be wonderfully, unapologetically alive for a little while. The old celebrations were never solely about observing the season. They were about participating in it. My lovely little heathens and heathen friendlies, have a beautiful week as summer begins to settle across the land. While you revel in the warming rays, don't forget the sunscreen and to stay hydrated. May these long daylight hours bring you warmth, good company, and a few quiet moments to simply appreciate being exactly where you are. And perhaps Baldr leaves us with one final lesson. Even knowing that light eventually wanes, we are still meant to step into it anyway. We are still meant to love deeply, celebrate fully, and create beauty while we can. Remember your connection to the divine. And in the middle of everything swirling through the world right now, don't forget to find your sacred breath.